You are listening to The Growth Signal. My name is Alyssa Nolte,
And I'm Beth Trejo.
and we're going to get right into it. Beth, what is your hot take?
My hot take is that most marketing and growth problems actually get labeled as strategy issues, but in reality, I believe they're workflow and ownership failures.
I would love to dig into this a little bit deeper because I have been I think victim is probably the right word, of a million gurus on the internet who talk to me about all of their strategies and their tricks and their hacks and their perfect blueprint mastermind, insert whatever buzzword you want to put on that, examples of their growth strategies. And what you're telling me is that it's not quite as difficult esoteric as strategy, but there's more of a concrete practical approach to growth.
Yes, and I think that, I have a love-hate relationship with the word strategy because on one hand, we use it internally. I run and own a marketing agency. But I also think that a lot of things hide, like you said, in between strategy and just the word itself. I actually think it becomes a safe word that marketers use at times,
Yeah.
whether they're trying to avoid hard decisions or they're, trying to flex a little bit. But I think in reality, when you start to break down what that word is and how you want marketing to work within your organization, I think that's when you really start to uncover kind of the underlying issues if something isn't working.
Yeah, and I think your point about what we call strategy and how we use the word versus what it actually is well taken. Because if I say, "Okay, what's your strategy?" Like to my 10-year-old, for example,
Yeah.
he doesn't really know, like, he doesn't know what that word really means, but to him, it's like, "Okay, what are the things that I'm gonna do to get the thing that I want?" So, if his want
Right.
is to have an extra hour of computer time and his expectation is that, "Okay, you're gonna clean up the room." If I say, "What's your strategy?" He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna sort all the things," and he's
Yeah.
kinda thinking through, like, he's more thinking process as a how I'm gonna go about this. But there are people out there who treat strategy like it's a vision board on Pinterest and not necessarily something that they're actually gonna use to make decisions to be successful.
Yeah, and I think that one of the easiest ways in my mind to define strategy is just the choice to win, right? What is your choices going to be and how are you going to win? And I think when you look at it through that lens, whether that's, part of a planning process or it's the process or it's the talent that you need or maybe it's the tools and technology, those things become more easily identified as tactics or resources, but the actual direction that you're going and the choices that you need to get there, to me, is the real strategy.
Mm. And I think that that too is something that can be really hard, especially for business owners and people who are kind of leading, their organization. Like, I don't know about you, you own a business, you run a business. I also do, and I feel like sometimes I'm so close to the concept, the idea, the vision, the way that I understand it, that it is really hard for me to step back and say, "Yes, I totally understand this. This blueprint makes sense to me." But if I tried to hand it off to anyone else
Right.
or for my customer to actually come through it, they don't have all the context and background and knowledge and love that I have for this organization, so therefore, they're not going to follow my strategy, right? Because there's always some other path that they're trying to go down.
Yeah. And I think, in today's day and age in marketing, we have so many choices and there are so many opportunities to try different things, right? It's no longer just a small pool of media mix to get
Right.
people to notice you. And so it's really easy to say yes, 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 yes. And then everything becomes watered down.
Yeah.
And when I see this happen, it's really usually because either you're trying to appease multiple stakeholders, you're trying to do too much at once, you may be out resourced, or you just may have a hard time saying no to things and no to other people because you can't do everything all at once, or it just,
Yeah.
in many cases, won't work out like you planned.
Well, and your point about, like, the number of channels is well taken. Like, there are so many different ways now to get attention, and it really has evolved so much even in the last, I feel like an old person saying this, but back in my day, like, we didn't have this many options when it came to stuff. It was like, okay, you work with the local TV news station to run a TV ad, you might be running Facebook ads, you're going to conferences, you're sponsoring events, like that kind of stuff. Like you had a pretty good mix of things to choose from, but it wasn't now where it's like, okay, do I advertise on Instagram? What about LinkedIn? What about Google? Should I run YouTube ads? Okay, now we're still just scratching the surface of digital. Should I sponsor this event? Should I do this,
Right.
do that? And like the sheer level of overwhelm I feel just even talking about it, I'm sitting here going, how do any businesses that don't have an entire team of people behind them make these decisions in a way that actually brings them that win that you talked about, right? Like, how do we do this in a way that lets us choose to win rather than winning by accident or winning by luck?
Right. And I think this is where my hot take comes in because I think a lot of people just say, well, you need a better strategy, or you need a different strategy, or you need a multi channel strategy. But I actually think in reality, the businesses and brands that do the most things and are able to test multi channel, multi platform, multi location are actually really good with marketing operations. And so that's why I think the word strategy and strategy problems just appears, but it's really a workflow failure, just wearing a little bit a nicer clothes, right? So one of the first things that I would recommend is clear ownership. Who owns what, and what is the definition of done? And I think if you start just with that one path to clarity, that really helps to understand, okay, regardless of what tools we use, you're gonna own it could be channel strategy, I've seen that, or it could be initiative strategy, which sometimes in today's day and age, it's a little bit easier to do it that way so you don't have too many repetitions of communication because the channels all need to speak to each other. So I like to break the ownership around clear themes and then categories of roles. So I run and own a social media agency. Social media is notoriously a million little tiny pieces of things, right? From did you size this appropriately, or is the audio approved? All of these little micro moments happen on social, which is why we've had to be operationally strong for ourselves and our clients. And so we've broken down the roles into kind of four main categories that I think other marketing teams and even businesses could leverage. So those roles are account management or somebody to be your resourcer. They're going to pull all the pieces together. These are people that tend to be really good at communication. They can build consensus around a common topic, and they know when to push and pull on internal and external stakeholders and resources.
I want to like double click on something that you said that I think really resonates regardless of if we're talking about marketing or sales or
Yeah,
any strategy. Operational strength is something that a lot of people ignore or actively avoid. I feel like that's maybe my hot take because it's not fun and it's not sexy and it requires discipline. And if it was easy, we would all do it. But from my perspective, operational strength is the thing that makes it possible for you to pivot and adapt your strategy, right? Because you made a comment of like, okay, we have to make sure the photo is sized the right way and the audio is approved and all of these things. Not even like touching on the fact that those platforms are constantly changing.
they are.
Like, so there's how many social media platforms depending on your audience, and they are making updates all the time because they're trying to keep their customers on the platform. So they're creating updates. I can't tell you how many times I log into Facebook's business manager or Meta, whatever it is now, the Meta business manager. And I'm like, okay, I know I used to be able to do this thing that I'm trying to do. Why can't I find it? Oh, it's because they moved it over there. Right. And so it's if you don't have that operational strength in place and that discipline, you're not only going to be trying to build that, but you're also going to be trying to keep up with all the evolution that is happening in our customers and how they make decisions, our platforms and how they operate, and every other channel that comes along because now we're all dealing with like AI search
Yeah.
and all of these different things that we didn't have to think about even a year ago.
Yeah, and I think I see this, like, and this is probably where this take comes from, but I see it so much with social because marketing leadership, especially CMOs, VPs, or even owners, if you're in a small organization, if they are not marketing minded, social media is one of the biggest annoyances that they have because it's hard to understand the correlation to business impact in many instances. And it feels and throughout time has been oversimplified And so there's always this big gap between my social media is not doing anything for my business and then throwing the keys to the youngest person in the office and not always setting that person up for success. And it just becomes this like constant friction point
Yeah.
where if you do have good systems in place, the platforms behave better, your outcomes become more clear. You have, you know, content that is more connected to your audience. And it's easier to see the ripple effects when everything is in line. Again, regardless of the strategy. And I think that that's one of the biggest things because most like marketers are just figuring out their social media operations on their own. They're making their own checklists, they're making their own content calendars, and that person leaves. And guess what? They have to start all over again. And
Yeah,
so
well,
it's,
especially if you're running your strategy on vibes
yeah,
of a single person rather than, like, thoughtful operational expertise, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who, you're thinking about it in terms of your business and not in terms of, what the latest greatest thing is, right? So, like, my business is not on Instagram. It's not relevant to us, right? But we're all over LinkedIn because if you had to tell me, like, okay, you have to be on TikTok and you have to be on Instagram and you have to make reels and you have to do all these things, I'd be like, I will do none of those things,
yeah, that's
or I
right.
will do them all very poorly. So if someone is listening to this and they're feeling that little twinge in the back of their mind that says, "Okay, I'm really running my strategy on vibes rather than running my strategy on operational excellence," and I'm misusing that word. What is the one thing that we need to start doing to move towards doing this the right way so that we can have strategy so that we can choose to win?
Yeah. So I think the first step is if that isn't not your natural tendency. I am not an operationally strong um
I'm not either.
marketer and I never was. And I've ran this company for 14 years and I've always put really great people around me that were. And so I do think that recognition of your own qualities and how you can show up to be your best self is step one. And there are so many amazing AI tools that I wish I would have had to help and support that. So, I mean, from the basic level, start with just documentation. How do you do things on a regular basis? And what are the things that, if you pulled that one step, everything would fall apart? Right. And so maybe that's proofing before something goes off. That's a huge piece of a operational is quality control. So whoever is the proof checker or the that last quality control point, that's a really strong one. So that's important. Then maybe some of the other ones, you kind of keep a little bit loose until you grow or until you expand. But there are probably some critical points of that are higher risk. So ad spend. Do you understand how budgets work? And can you make sure that there's fail safeguards so that the extra zero doesn't through your budget? I've seen that many of times. And then, like I said, before something is posted, is there some form of review? Alignment of content. Are you actually making something that somebody wants or is giving them value? There's so much slop out there that it has to be even sharper than we've had in the past of connecting to your audience. And that
Let's talk. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, and that role that I was talking about, like breaking down those roles, that resourcer is typically the first one that most businesses need. They think that they need an all in one marketer, but nobody is a unicorn. They can't do all the things. And so when I am talking to business leaders about hiring marketing, I say find somebody who understands enough to hold others accountable and can, qualify good from great, but is really good at pulling together pieces, whether it's contractors, agencies, whoever, to help expand those capabilities when you need it the most.
Yeah, I think especially in marketing, all-in-one people are a myth. Like, there
Yeah.
is no one out there who is all-in-one. Even, like, 15 years ago when I was in college, my small D1 university in Northern Iowa had a marketing degree, and it had 5 different emphasis that you could
Well,
go through. It was, like, advertising and promotion, digital, international,
yeah.
like, all supply chain and logistics. I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm not sure how that's marketing." But anyway, I digress. So it's like there really is no such thing as someone who does all in one because the skills required to do video production are very different than
Right.
the skills to create ads versus running ads and all of that goes into it. So I couldn't agree more. You need like a person who can be that monolith in the middle who's really good at spinning out and seeing other people's talents and bringing them to the table.
Yeah.
I do wanna ask you about, the timing of it all,
Mhm.
right? So, in this day and age, we are all notoriously impatient.
Yeah.
So, when we're trying these new things, when we're going forward with that operational excellence and we're building our first growth plan that we're planning to go forward with, how long do we go before we say, "Hey, this might not be the right strategy for me?"
I think, it's going to vary based on the industry and what you're trying to do. I hate that when people say, "It just depends," but it really does.
Yeah.
But I would say, for social, let's just take that one channel. You need to be able to get out of the learning phase if you're doing any form of paid social, and you need to be able to, you know, build up that engagement to signal even the paid side of things. So 3 months is really the minimum that I would let a campaign run before you make drastic changes. You can make optimizations, tweaks. Should we move something on the landing page? Should we add in new copy? Should we add in new creative? Those can be done on a regular basis, but big, like, levers or cancellations of trials, I would say, 3 to 4 months is pretty standard in most industries.
And I think that setting the expectation is really important there because I've worked with people who would run an ad for a week. And if it didn't produce magical results, like, well, clearly this is not working. We have to change something. And then it was constant like brand whiplash and it was messaging whiplash and everything was changing all the time. And I wanted to be like, I think that maybe you need to give the algorithm a hot second to like catch up and figure out what you're trying to do so it knows who to push to. Right? So, yeah, validation for my gut feel then on at least 3 months minimum because, like with this podcast, for example, I've been doing it for over a year, but it took like 6 months probably for anyone like, for me to really feel like I was getting traction, and if I had given up after the first month of, not being a massive I'm not Joe Rogan yet, so I guess I have to, give up on that. I think there's a lot of people who look at virality on social media and this idea that if I spend $100, I should get $1,000 in return on investment immediately. So, help us understand, like, is virality a real thing? Is that something we can expect, or is that a thing that we all talk about? Like the difference between a plane crash and a car crash, right? Much more likely to be in a car crash than a plane crash, but we all talk about the plane crashes.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the return on investment, because I know a lot of people are either, especially in marketing, are getting pushed to have very defined answers for that. But what I want everybody to remember is that right now we have a very low trust buying group, right? Consumers
Yeah.
have hesitation. They are weary of brands, especially if you are in or selling anything that is more complicated or a higher price point. B2B, technical sales, anything that has a level of education or again, the price point is higher. That needs a higher authority and level of trust. And so when you have that, you have to have more touch points. You are going to have to shake a lot of hands before you find somebody who is going to be your perfect match, right? And we have known this in real life for years and years and years. But for some reason, when it moved to digital, it people wanted that quick turnkey
Yeah.
approach. And so when you're looking at return, because I totally understand everything needs to be correlated to business goals, I would just look at scenario planning, right? So if you are trying to reach a very niche audience that is, let's say, only 50,000 people that could even be in that audience, of those 50,000, how many people do you think you could reach online? How many of those do you think you could, connect with the problem that you're solving? And you just kind of like go down that line to be able to better estimate. Okay, well, this is going to be an expensive campaign, but my price point's high. So if I can sell 2 of these products in the next 6 months, I'll feel good about bringing in new customers that we then can upsell and, expand services. So that's the best I think I've found to have real dialogue about return on investment is just risk and scenarios.
Considering all of the people that you know or aspire to know, who else is out there? Who else do we need to be listening to?
Well, I think, if I had to pick like one person, one of my favorites, he actually owns another agency and he's an agency owner I've followed for a long time. His name is Will and he's at Sear Interactive. He's their chief innovation officer. And he talks so much about just what's happening with AI and how it is changing, and I just think he's a really good communicator, so he's one that I always follow on LinkedIn for sure.
And if someone is loving this conversation, they want more of you, where can they find you online?
They can go to ChatterKit, just like it sounds, one word, and, my name is Beth Trejo, and it's pretty accessible on all the platforms. Our handle is ChatterKick, and you can find me linked on our website.
And if you're looking for me, you can head to LinkedIn, search Alyssa Nolte, and if you find the notorious plant killer, you know you have found the right Alyssa Nolte. I'm also writing on Substack under Alyssa Likes to Talk. Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the call today to tell us about your vision of what strategy is versus what process is versus what wishful, hopeful thinking is. I love your idea of, we can make the choice to win, but we have to do what it takes to get the right people in place, to get the right operational excellence, and to really make sure that our strategy reflects that choice overall. So, Beth, thank you so much for taking the time. I loved this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. There are millions of podcasts out there, and something like 70,000 new episodes are released every single day. It's not lost on me how lucky I am to have such an incredible community who show up and support this show. To be a guest or nominate someone who should join me on the pod, head to alyssanolte.com. And if you're looking for ad-free episodes, you can join me on Substack. I post all new episodes of my podcasts and share appearances on other people's shows, plus bonus content and updates on what I'm working on. Search Alyssa Likes to Talk or tap the link in the show notes.